I didn't realize it had done that.
Yeah, I mean, we hadn't had audio problems in a long time, I think. So there's no reason to like check for that.
Welcome, everyone, to another Haven of Horror. We are live talking about The Cabin in the Woods. So there's a couple of reasons I picked this, and I'm going to see if Torgo knows the second one. But first, as always, I'm subject. This is Torgo. Welcome,
Oh,
everybody. So, Torgo, obviously, I had picked this because you'd never seen it. But
yep.
considering what we have reviewed and done lately, can you think of why else I would have picked this?
I think the number one reason is that this movie owes a lot to Evil Dead. Specifically the first one. They kind of throw back to the first Evil Dead movie a lot in this movie.
So that is part of it, but the main thing is that this is like this is like what Scream was to slashers for the cabin in the wood genre. And we've been talking about Evil Dead, which starts as a cabin in the woods thing. So I figured before we move into, I guess, a heads up announcement, before we move on to our Shutter Shuffle season, I figured why not end this semi trilogy of videos, the Evil Dead commentary, which I had to take down because my computer's an asshole, um, with um, or Evil Dead
With Cabin
commentary,
in the
Evil Dead
Woods.
Rise, and then end it with Cabin in the Woods. So I'm gonna let you do a lot of the talking, at least up front, because this is
Okay.
your first time watching it, and I
Yeah.
want you to tell us kind of what your thoughts were watching it.
All right. Well, I mean, we're reviewing Cabin in the Woods, which is a movie that came out back in 2011, right? Or
Yes,
2012?
11.
Okay. 11. And it's directed by Drew Goddard, also written by him and Joss Whedon. Um, and it's a pretty standard horror movie about kids that go into a cabin in the woods and they get picked off one by one, and not a whole lot else happens besides that.
Okay, so I agree, but that is also kind of a vast oversimplification of it. I
I'm
would
being so.
say,
I mean, I'm hiding a lot.
yeah. So how did you feel? Because I guess the main thing that this movie lives and dies on, I think, is the characters as well as the satire. Did the satire play for you?
No, it did. It did. Well, I mean, we should say that. I mean, spoilers for this movie. Well,
For
this whole
this
discussion
10-year
is
old movie.
this over 10-year-old movie. This whole discussion is going to be spoiler filled. I did know that this was like a kind of a meta horror movie going in, and I knew that like the basic premise was there's this like organization behind the scenes controlling like the events of what happens at the cabin and like influencing the decisions of the kids who are there. I knew about all that. I didn't know much of what else would happen in like the third act, which kind of goes completely off the rails, but we'll get there.
So,
Um,
did it go off the rails in a good way or a bad way for you? Was it too much?
a good way, a very
Okay.
good way. No, I loved this movie overall. I think this continues the tradition of like with Scream of being like a really good like meta commentary on the whole genre of horror. This kind of delving into more subgenres than Scream did. That was primarily focused on the slasher. This kind of tackles the slasher in terms of like character tropes, like you have the jock and the virgin and the stoner and the whore as they call her. Although what's an interesting twist on that whole thing is that those characters actually aren't really that at all. They don't really naturally fit into those stereotypes. They're like kind of uh, made to be into those stereotypes by the organization. Um,
Yeah, and in some ways through drugs and other
yeah,
things.
yeah, they're influenced by. Well, you have the dumb blonde character who they say is not actually. She's not naturally blonde, but she's been dyeing her hair, and the dye is kind of making her like this traditional stupid dumb blonde. And Chris Hemsworth's character is, they say, is typically not a dumb jock. He's just acting different because he's on drugs or something.
Yeah, they mention it's something at the cabin kind of makes him that stereotypical alpha male of the pack. Like he starts acting
Yeah.
aggressive and dumb.
No,
Um,
they say he's actually like a sociology major or something, right?
yeah, that was my favorite part because it works on twofold, right? Because you see Chris Hemsworth and you think, oh, he's going to play the dumb jock.
Yeah.
So he's forced into that role, but it's the movie also messing with you because that's not who he really is.
Yeah. And the virgin's not actually a virgin. Like right off the bat, they say that she had like an affair with a professor or something.
Yeah, so like her kind of setup for the reason she goes to the cabin is that she like got dumped by her professor or something.
Right.
Um,
And then you have the stoner, who's probably arguably the smartest character in the movie, but is
he's the
usually like
best.
the stupid character in most slasher movies.
He's the best. The moral of this story is just be high 24/7 because then you're not
Yeah.
susceptible to brainwashing drugs. I don't know who that actor is. He looks really familiar. I'm gonna look him up, but he is easily
Yeah.
my favorite character
I
in
think he
this
was my
movie.
favorite character too. Because that's a character I think you could easily mess up, but I think what's smart about this movie is the fact that he is like high 24/7, and also the fact that they kind of made him like a conspiracy nut means that like he's on to all of this like behind the scenes bullshit more than any of the other characters. And he like, and he eventually discovers that they are being watched when he finds the camera.
Yeah, and because you set up, this paranoid delusion issue that he has, nobody believes him, even when he is telling the truth. Now,
Yeah.
one weak point, at least based on this viewing, because it's been a while since I've watched this since this viewing, but we also have one of the football teammates who is designated the fool, played by Jesse Williams, who is also in Detroit Become Human, the video game. He's the least
Oh.
he's just there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean he's the probably the most bland character. I don't know if that's by design, because they're making fun of horror movie characters who really aren't that deep. But I don't know. Everyone else kind of had a unique twist to them, and he was just kind of there.
See, and I feel like that's instantly fixed if that's what you're going for. Is like, just have somebody go, "Hey, didn't he wasn't he cool before, or like, didn't he have like more of a personality? Was
Yeah,
it more outgoing?
yeah.
He's
Like
just
he's
kind
a
of
lot more
there."
dull now. Yeah,
Yeah, and I love the scene where he realizes it's a two-way mirror and tells her,
yeah.
like, "You're a football player, dude. I do not believe for a second that you would do that."
Well, and that's also kind of a subversion of what you would think would happen in most horror movies, because you go back to like Friday the 13th, and like a lot of the guy characters in that are just pervs, and they probably wouldn't do what he did in that situation.
My favorite joke in this movie is I think it's when they're all grouped up right after one of the they find the ghosts and they're like, "Yeah, we should stick together." So they flood it with
Yeah,
those pheromones, and Chris Hemsworth's like, "Guys, I think we should split up." And the stoner guy's like,
yeah.
"What?"
Why? He's like, seriously? Yeah, no. There's a lot of great meta jokes in this movie about like different horror tropes, and like I think that's this movie's strongest aspect, is that it is a love letter to like the horror genre as a whole, but it's also a really good critique of it.
It does the Scream thing of it balances this is a satire, a good movie, and a love letter because the problem with a lot of those parody movies of the 2000s, besides the fact that the scripts are awful,
Yeah.
is I don't think it comes from a place of we love this thing. So let's
Not at
make
all.
fun of this thing. Wouldn't it be funny if we did this?
No, yeah. I mean, I believe even the first Scary Movies, that was only made because I think the Wayans were tired of seeing movies like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, like flood
Which is
the
funny because they clearly
theater.
didn't understand Scream.
Well, I mean, yeah, that movie's clearly a satire, and they're doing a parody of a satire.
Yeah, so the one thing I would argue with you on you said earlier is this is more of a micro genre than Scream. I would say this is actually broader than Scream. Scream is specifically the subgenre of
Oh,
slasher.
no, yeah, I was saying that this covers more than Scream.
Oh, I think I might have
Yeah.
misunderstood. I thought you had it backwards.
No, no, I was saying Scream was more specific. This covers like a huge wide range of different subgenres, like even, Japanese horror at some point.
Yeah, and folklore and everything. Because
Yeah.
we'll get to that with the monsters, and I love the monsters. So one thing I want to point
Yeah.
out, obviously this is a Joss Whedon production, but not directed by him. And I didn't notice any others, but there's one big Buffy verse cast member in this, and
Mhm.
I don't think you would have picked it up because I don't think we got there yet. But the scientist lady that's like always talking to the two scientist guys.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That is Amy Acker, who played Fred on Angel.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we got there
I
when we
don't, I
watched
don't,
through,
I don't remember. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I don't remember
but
exactly who
I'm.
that is. But
It always puts a smile on my face when I watch this and she pops up because I've never seen her in anything else but Angel in this.
yeah,
But she's a really good actress.
we should talk more about that other side of the movie, the whole like the office aspect of this movie, because I knew that was a thing going into it, but I was really shocked that it started out in that setting. Like the first scene in the movie is Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins' characters just having a mundane conversation. I was like, all right, they're revealing this early. I was surprised to see
Yeah,
that.
I never thought about it that way, but now that you mention it, I do wonder how interesting it would have been if like we followed these characters almost exactly the way it is, but all the office stuff is cut out, and then at the end you
Yeah.
find out when the protagonist does.
Well, I was kind of expecting that it would kind of play out as normal, and then in the middle, you find out that there's all these people controlling what's happening, and then it kind of continues on from that point.
Do you
So
think that might have been a little bit better, given a bit more of a intrigue?
I think it kind of deflates the mystery a little bit because I'm like, or maybe it's a little bit my fault because I like maybe knew a little bit too much about this going in, but at the same time, I think it kind of deflates the mystery a little bit. It's like, all right, I already know that there's people like messing with stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think my least favorite joke is probably in the office scenes where they're messing with that one guy by putting him on speaker. It's like that's
Oh,
not a terrible
I thought
it's
that
not
was
a
funny.
terrible joke, but I think it's probably one of the weakest ones.
Yeah. And I say like I don't know how I would restructure this movie because I say that it kind of would have been better if they didn't reveal that stuff until later, but at the same time I like that it cuts back and forth because it like kind of has that thing of you're watching like the audience's reaction to a horror movie.
Yeah.
With these characters, it's a lot like in the third act of Scream, where it's like those characters are watching the security camera, and it's like, oh, they're watching the movie.
I just also love the idea of every like slasher or horror film is one of their tests.
Yeah,
Like, oh, we got Jason Voorhees on camera 12 and Michael Myers is on camera 2 and Chucky's on camera 6. That little shit's off running off. We can't find him.
yeah. I mean, I do think the two main guys played by Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins, so they're probably like two of my favorite characters in the movie. Just like I think they have some of the funniest moments.
They're so good. For me, I like those two. I like the main girl a lot, which I'm gonna circle back to, and I like the stoner. Obviously, the stoner is my favorite, but those four are kind of the best. And then they give just enough character development that I'm not like annoyed that I have to spend so long with these other characters, but it's clear they're there to signify something and then die.
Yeah.
So circling back, how did you feel about the final girl or the virgin, who's not really a virgin?
Well, I like that it's kind of a same subversion that Scream did with that whole thing. It's like typically the virgin is the one to survive, and then like she loses her virginity, but she still survives. So it's kind of like a subversion of that whole trope. But I also like the character itself. I think she's okay. Like, I like that she's smarter than most of the characters in that situation, but like she wasn't especially like memorable, like as like a all time like a final girl. I don't know.
Okay, so I was wrong. There is one more Buffy alumni in this movie. One of the interns, which I probably blinked and missed it, is one of the villains in Buffy later on.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's I'll point him out if we ever get back to that Buffy watch through. Um, yeah, so I agree with you. And but a lot of what else I have to say kind of ties in with the ending, so we will get there as well. This isn't going to be like a super in-depth review because I think part of the problem is, like you said, this isn't a complicated movie. This is a
I think
satirical
yeah.
movie.
I think once you get what's going on, you kind of like you're like, oh yeah, I get it. Not that it like what that has to say is bad or anything. It's just like it's not hard what this movie's trying to say.
Well, and it's like Buffy, right? Where it's not trying to be some like brilliant thing. It's just like I have this thing that I want to say about this thing that I love, and in doing
Yeah.
so, they kind of make a brilliant piece of art by dissecting the genre. Because obviously, Buffy is a dissection of the scared little girl trope in horror films. What
Yeah.
if that girl was the badass? What if she
What
was?
if she was a hero?
Yeah. So this is kind of right at home for Joss Whedon in terms of writing. And do you feel like the writing throughout is strong, or does it ever falter off for you?
No, I thought it was. I thought a lot of the quippiness that Whedon is known for in his work was very appropriate in a movie like this. Less so something like I don't know, Age of Ultron, just because what I remember from that is like he goes a little too far with the quips in certain scenes and that. But this is more appropriate because it's a comedy, so it makes sense to have like dialogue like that in a movie like this.
Isn't it also just so fucking nice not to have to listen to like wannabe Whedon or like overworked Whedon? Like this is just Whedon doing what he's good at.
Yeah, and
When
I'm
he's
also Drew Goddard too. Like he's not to we shouldn't forget about him. Like his contributions to this movie, I think, are what make it work as well.
of course, and I was actually going to get to that here next. But I did just want to say as well, when I say Joss Whedon, whether it be this or Buffy, and I know there's all these allegations against him, we're not going to address that. Don't ask. I don't
Yeah,
care. But Joss Whedon is only as good as his
that's a
team.
whole other thing.
And the thing with Joss Whedon is that he picked a very good team that knows how to complement his style, whether it's a TV show or a movie. So I'm going to let you take the field on this one. But how did you feel? How did you feel about the directing in this film? Because you're more knowledgeable about that stuff.
Well, I'm glad. I'll just say based on Whedon's filmography, I'm glad that it was Goddard that directed this rather than him. If you look at it, the first Avengers movie specifically, that just looks like a TV movie. Whereas
And
this
you didn't have that with this.
did not have that with this. It looks, more like a horror movie, which obviously is appropriate for the material that they're directing. So
Yeah, so I think I would imagine Max where you watch this just has like a 1080p stream. This looks
yeah.
beautiful on 4K.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know if it was on 4K yet. I should pick that up.
Yeah, our mutual buddy Connor actually added me one day, and it was like, "Hey, Best Buy has this," and it was like $30. So I was like, "Fuck it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely pick this movie up because I can see myself. I can see this becoming a favorite of mine. Like the more I rewatch it.
Hell yeah. Well, and like with me, we've talked about this before. Is me who's someone that's very kind of unsatisfied with the current horror genre. Where we get a million like Conjuring and Conjuring ripoffs. Something
Yeah,
like this is a breath of fucking fresh air.
because it's different. It's original. It's not like the same bullshit over and over again. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, I don't watch it. Like, I haven't seen any of the Conjuring movies, but like, it's the type of horror that I'm not really interested in. And like, I don't know, the new Insidious does not look appealing to me at all. I'd like to see something like this that kind of balances, that like subverts your expectations while balancing comedy and horror, and like, I don't know, just like something different like this. I'd like to see something like this happen again.
I agree. And when I say for me personally, obviously, I can't speak for Torgo or anyone else. I almost like combined your names, and almost like called
Oh.
you Tora.
I'm not the Torah. No.
But the thing that I hate the most about The Conjuring, other than it's fucking boring, and all of its spin-offs, is they take themselves so seriously to the point it's comical, but I'm not supposed
Yeah.
to be laughing, so I'm just annoyed. Whereas with this, it's like, yeah, I'm
It's not
supposed to
afraid to have fun.
laugh. Yeah. Make your horror movies fun again.
Yeah. Oh, and
You're
then
not scary.
I think that's probably a good segue to talk about the third act and the end of this movie, because I was having a blast at that point when it goes insane at the end.
Yes. So did you know about any of that beforehand?
I didn't know that like it became like a whole like monsters running rampage like across the whole thing. I knew about like the behind the scenes stuff with the organization, but I didn't know about any of that or how the movie ended. And
This is
it's
one of the best modern examples of we're going to play our cards really close to our chest the first time you watch it,
Mhm.
but we're going to reward you for it.
Yeah, because
And
this
we're
movie
going to
goes
reward
nuts.
you big time. So how did you feel about the monster designs?
Um, I think they were all really cool. I'm trying to remember like which ones stuck out to me. I like the werewolf that attacks her at the end.
Which is really funny because Buffy tries werewolves like 600 times and they all look
Yeah,
awful.
this one gets it right finally.
It only took him 30 years.
Yeah. I thought the ghosts were pretty cool. Oh, the merman that like was
The
teased throughout
merman,
the movie.
you know what? I'm going to argue with you on a point earlier. The merman setup makes all of those office scenes immediately worth it
Yeah,
because that's
yeah,
not as cool if you don't have those.
yeah. Because Bradley Whitford, the whole movie, he's like, I kind of wish a merman attacked them. Like, I kind of like wish we got the merman. And the whole time I'm thinking, just like traditional like looking merman. I'm like, that wouldn't have been cool. And then you see it at the end, and it's like, oh my god.
We got a unicorn.
Yeah, unicorn stabs someone.
I
There's
love
like
that they threw that in there. Like it's
there's
such a
a
small random detail.
there's like a giant snake. There's kind of like a pinhead looking guy that
Yeah.
like because earlier they set up in the cellar there's all these different artifacts,
Yeah.
and they give the subjects like a choice of like whichever one they go with will trigger the monster, and like there's kind of like this like ball thing where that this guy was holding, and he kind of like reminded me a little bit of Pinhead.
Oh,
I thought he was
interesting.
cool. Yeah, I think just because he's got like a puzzle box kind of looking thing. That's what I thought of.
You opened the box.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, and it's glorious, just carnage. Like they massacred that entire facility.
yeah.
Now, this is a movie where I could not tell if the blood was CGI or practical. I assume it was probably a mix. Did you notice any kind of bad CGI with it?
I think in a few places, but I can't like immediately point to anything because I watched this movie last night, so like I'm not sure. Nothing that was like atrocious that stuck out to me as like really bad. Like I have to talk about this, but I think I'm inclined to agree with you that it was kind of like a mix of CG and practical.
So now for the ending, did you know
Yeah,
that Sigourney was in this?
I did not. That was a surprise. I was like, oh yeah, yeah. Sigourney Weaver, who's awesome. She's the director of the whole operation.
Of the
Kind of like,
movie.
yeah, because it's obviously this whole thing's supposed to be like they're making a horror movie, and she's like the boss, so she's called the director. Um, and the whole thing, obviously, they talk about the subjects are supposed to be sacrifices to these old gods, which that's another like this movie ropes in like a bunch of different genres of horror. I was surprised that they managed to do like it's kind of Lovecraftian, this whole idea of the ancient ones, I think they're called, or like the old gods or whatever, because I think that's actually a term. Like I think Cthulhu is called like an old god in Lovecraftian stories.
That
um
sounds about right, yeah.
yeah, I was surprised to see that. uh but yeah, no, I mean, it's it's strange to call the ending of this movie satisfying because the world ends.
Yeah, I
Like,
was gonna ask you how you felt about that. Is the ending for you too dark for a satire? Or
uh, I mean, it's a satire of a horror movie, so I think it's appropriately dark. And like, you know, for all this movie's kind of points of horror movie audiences kind of just want to watch blood and carnage. They
they're
give
not
you
wrong.
all they give you all of that blood and carnage at the end of this movie. And then like I think the ultimate thing capping that off is like the entire world ends. So it's like what more carnage could you ask for?
Yeah, no, I can, and you know, I never thought about it that way, but I can kind of see what you're saying. I've always been rather satisfied with the ending personally. So I agree. And I don't look at people's reactions to movies. I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
it's all just, "Well, I didn't do this. This wasn't realistic. Who cares?"
Well, in that way, the old gods are kind of a stand-in for movie audiences, because like if they like the subjects have to do like they have to die in a certain way, and like you know the virgin doesn't have to die or whatever, but they all have to die, and if not, they get disappointed and they cause a rampage.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting.
No, yeah, I can definitely see that. So I guess the last thing we really need to bring up, because I do think we've, kind of covered the majority of what's important with this movie, is how did you feel about the actual kills themselves? Obviously, it's at least the important kills, right? Like the teenagers. There's only three.
um yeah, some of them aren't that memorable. Like I think uh do you actually? I guess you do see the blonde girl die, but I don't remember exactly how that happened.
So it's a mix because you see her get the bear trap on her back and like pulled into the shadows, and then like
Hmm.
her head comes rolling out, I believe.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Um, well, I'll just say my favorite death was Chris Hemsworth's.
It's so good. He just smacks right into that barrier.
Yeah, yeah, because you kind of forget that there's a force field there. They established that earlier with like a bird flying into it, and then later that happened, and so it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Um, Hemsworth himself, though, maybe it's because I'm so used to seeing him as Thor, but I thought his accent was kind of all over the place in this movie. I could kind of hear the Australian popping out in certain scenes.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Do you think that was on purpose though?
Um,
It's so hard to
I
tell
don't
with a
know.
movie like this, right? Because
I
what's
think
on
that's
purpose and what's an accident?
I think with that's probably Hemsworth's best attempt at trying to do an American accent. I haven't seen him try to do an American accent in other movies just because I think I just know him as Thor outside of this.
I mean, it's a cameo basically, but he was George Kirk.
Oh, true. That's right. I forgot. Forgot because that movie sucks.
Nine isn't that bad.
Yeah, that's a different. That's a different movie though.
Well, that's the one that he's George Kirk in.
No, I mean like I could talk about why I don't like that movie, but we won't get into it here.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to ratings. I think judging by your letterbox review, we're about the same. I'm gonna give it a 4
Yeah.
out of 5. We forgot to do that for Rise. Was it Rise? Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
forgot to do that for
I
Rise.
don't think we did that for Evil Dead Rise. So if you're curious about Evil Dead Rise, I gave that 3.5.
I also gave it 3.5.
But this movie I gave it a 4. I think there's some things that hold it back from being like a 9, or I go out of 10, so I'm thinking like 9 out of 10. But there's some things that hold it back from it being like a
5 out of 5.
yeah, a 5 out of 5 or a 4.5. But like for what it's trying to do, it's very solid, and I think it's a very good critique and satire of the horror genre.
Hell yeah. All right, well that was Cabin in the Woods. Thank you everybody for tuning in, watching live, or after the fact if you're doing so. And then, like I kind of hinted at, or I guess outright mentioned, we are working to bring Shutter Shuffle back, which I think is going to be the next thing we do when we get together. We don't have any dates or anything concrete planned. Like I said, we're just kind of taking it one video at a time.
It.
We're winging it. We're doing it live. We're getting
do
drunk.
it live. Yeah, we'll have to pick out movies for that, and then I guess maybe we'll spin the wheel off camera and do an episode on one, and then spin the wheel again on camera.
Yeah, it'd be a little hard to spin the wheel. We'll just spin the wheel and then watch it on camera and be like, this is the thing.
This is the thing.
But all right, that is going to be it for us. Thank you again so much for everyone.